NerdCon. Come on out, get something signed, take a photo, say hello, let's share some stories and create some memories, you know? Peace.
So join us by visiting theurbannerdcon.net for ticket and vendor information. This will be the premier blurred event in the universe. theurbannerdcon.net. Our heroes, our villains, our stories, everyone's con. See you there.
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service with Slow Burn. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge featuring a meticulous curated collection of premium cigars. It's more than a mobile lounge. It's an environment and an experience rich in history, luxury, and personality. An elegant extension of any celebration occasion. It's the perfect escape and meeting place, a space where you can relax or enjoy a shared passion. Have Slow Burn plan your next big event, or before you are planning to celebrate your win over your athletic rival, you can shop our collections at www.slowburnwaco.com.
But if they want to tab, I'ma do the dab, yeah.
One bite of 100% Angus beef ballpark frank, and you'll say, hello, summer. Oh yeah, it's ballpark season.
Q Time is a classic Atlanta soul food restaurant located in the historic West End. Q Time Soul Food is a family business started by Fred and Christine Crenshaw. Come on in, relax, and sink your chops into our tantalizing, mouth-watering, distinctive soul food with a twist, the Q Time way. 1120 Ralph David Abernathy Boulevard, or call your order in at 4...
Yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, love it. I love it, love it. I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, Q-Tab, I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip-hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir.
Mean mugging everybody. This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Welcome to episode 276 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU dash for all things HBCU sports, from institutions large and small, from NEIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to KCOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, multi-Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in the home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Sorry for the late start, having a little technical difficulties, but we got with you. Going to display a lot of the niceties. I will say, Charles, how you doing today?
Doing well, Doc. Doing well. Another big week as far as HBCUs. I'm sure we'll get into a little bit of the news a little bit later on, but ready to go.
Yeah, it's a lot of big news. A lot of folks messing with Jack State again, so I'm sure you'll have something to smile about today. Mike Washington, how you doing today?
Pretty good, Doc. How you doing? Glad to be back in the house. Yes, there's news about that little bitty school in Mississippi.
just like that. We got Dr. Keaton on, and we're gonna get to her.
What's
Welcome
going
to the
on?
show, Dr. Keaton. How you doing? You came in with the mean mug, but we're glad to see you smiling now. What's going on with the world?
I had an email come in. My bad. That's
No,
the bad
no
part
problem,
about
no
Zoom.
problem.
Got stuff popping
Yeah.
up. I'm good.
I was looking at her picture on the profile, and then I looked up, and she had this mean mug. I was like,
I'm just as friendly as my profile picture, I promise.
I don't know. That profile picture looked
I mean, I know you got all these awards for, you know, as a faculty student, say you just grab faculty person, but you come in the classroom like that, you will scare a lot of folks. They'll be like, oh, where the drop slip?
That is until they realize I am their professor. You know, black don't crack, so they think I'm their peer until I stand up there.
This is true. Well, really wanted to get into it and provide some research. Oftentimes we talk about HBCUs, and this time of the year we like to get into HBCU research. But I'm really excited this time because oftentimes we talk about HBCUs, and it happens to be oftentimes about a Black male athletes, African-American male athletes. But you have a chance to really showcase Black female college athletes in an article that you wrote talking about the sense of belonging at historically Black college universities or HBCUs. Obviously, I got to meet you with my Dr. Cooper, as we would say, basically pledged under Dr. Cooper. That's a different side. Those that went to the academy, they realize what that is. Charles is going through that now, so I'm hazing him like
there we go.
All outdoors. I'm getting a little payback with Mike too. He's doing in the program there, so
there we
he
go.
beat up on me back in the day.
I love it.
Yeah, so you got some folks that are trying to get to the next level, and they will eventually as they continue to do. But give a little bit about folks about your background. Obviously, BA Colorado State Sociology, Master of Education, University of Texas Higher Education Leadership Policy. Obviously, with the Black student athletes, Dr. Moore, Jackson State, who brings a lot of African American Blacks, males and females, into the academy to earn their master's and doctorate.
That's correct.
Oftentimes, they include HBCU graduates. You did your PhD. You went from Texas all the way to the East Coast, University of Connecticut, learning leadership, educational policy, concentration, sport management. Finished December 2021, and now you're at the University of Louisville, putting in the work and getting it done. Man, Dr. Cooper brings you up there, then he leaves you. What's all that about?
You know, I think outside looking in, it looks bad, but actually he was there the whole time. Very hands-on with me. Never was always one call away, and then COVID happened. So then we were all just one call away and had to do this virtually. So it was great to be up there those 2 years with him, but also the challenges and how my scholarship evolved and changed in some ways in the management space, having various mentors mentor me. So it was a blessing in disguise. I can't say it was a negative experience.
It's good to hear. One of the things that I remember Dr. Cooper always talks about is research. That research is essentially what you want to study. So before we get into this particular study, what are some of the other things that are, or I should say, what type of research and why do you want to research what you're researching?
Yeah, so right now, really looking, I'm not sure if y'all on the talk are familiar, but there's these diversity and athletic inclusion officers. I call them athletic diversity and inclusion officers, ADIOs. Y'all probably saw a wave of them, an insurgence. Unfortunately, after the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, everyone started having a diversity and inclusion officer. They were oftentimes Black women. And so I've been studying the conundrum of, Black women in the research and their lived experiences haven't had inclusion for themselves. What is that labor to then go create inclusive white organizations when you're still trying to figure out what inclusion looks like for you? Looking at Black women coaches, I know Dawn Staley has, shattered records, especially with her new 2020 or $22 million contract, but Black women in basketball are not head coaches. It's still very much so white women and male dominated. And so looking at that experience, and then also turning to the WNBA. And so this concentration on Black women athletes and leaders, but also basketball, that's where that me search comes in. Is I was a basketball player at Colorado State.
Could you play?
I played. And I also like to add, there's a lot of student athletes, but I won. So I left with 2 championships. The way the Mountain West works, if you don't win the conference tournament, you don't go to the NCAA tournament. I know, unfortunately, it's like that for many conferences. So never went to the NCAA tournament, but did win conference outright 2014 and 2015.
Congratulations. Good stuff. Before I let them jump in and ask some follow-up questions, let's get into this Black female college athlete census of belongings at historically Black college university. Why is it important to do research on HBCUs? I think I know that answer, but I'd like to get your perspective and why it becomes just as important to make sure that it's inclusive of the African-American or Black female college athlete as well.
So concentrated on the Black female athlete experience, there was still a dearth of research and data on Black female student athletes at historically white colleges and universities. But what was missing and what I really love about this piece is the cultural connection they feel to not be the only one in their sport. So they're not the only swimmer. They're not the only volleyball player. And I think it shatters stereotypes, even in their own lived experience, to my travel team. I couldn't talk about hair on, I couldn't be a bowler and have these conversations about race and the intersection of who I am. And even when I look at my own experience, I was constantly, I loved my teammates, but half of the team was from Europe. So I'm constantly having to explain Blackness. I'm constantly having to explain the complexities of them solely focused on Black men. They just had no context for it. And so being the only on my team, I had to have these conversations with whiteness that at times, I learned about myself, but it's exhausting. And so for these athletes in the HBCU space, it's not perfect. If you read the paper, you'll see they're still dealing with what other student athletes are dealing with. They don't have enough time. They want more resources. That's a shared student athlete experience. But when you get into the cultural experience, I think that's what really sets HBCUs apart. And what, in my opinion, historically white colleges are trying to replicate. They're trying to create that space, but it's so organic in the HBCU space. In my opinion, you can't replicate it. What you can do is think about what those Black athletes need to navigate a predominantly white space, but they're not navigating in the HBCU space. They're embedded in it, if that makes sense.
Well, let me switch over. Professor Bishop kind of leaned forward when you got into some of that. You're getting in his wheelhouse, and so I wanted to let him follow up with a question.
Well, yeah, I wanted to follow up and ask this question in terms of replicating that space and the difficulty of attempting to replicate that space. How is it for especially diversity and inclusion officers in terms of some pitfalls that they might fall in? Or the question I guess I'm trying to ask is, if a predominantly white college has a culture that is wholly different from the Black athlete experience, University of Texas, they sing the eyes of Texas, or whatever the case might be, or Texas A&M has their tradition. How is it that athletes are able to attempt to navigate this space?
Oh, that's a good question. I think had you asked me that before what we saw, this racial reckoning of the summer of 2020, I think that's the manifestation of your question. They weren't able to anymore. I think they were able to have guest speakers. They were able to bring in old football alums for the football team and see this could be you. But I think Black athletes it's in the historically white space, their consciousness was raised in a different way, to where I would say they're bringing these demands, they're bringing these concerns to the athletic department. And now in my own research, I'm seeing it puts the ADIO in a pickle, because they're trying to be legitimate to their colleagues. They're balancing power, even though in my own data set, they're very disruptive. They want to burn it all down, but they can't. And so everyone's still, hopping this line of, we're trying to placate, but we're not trying to placate. We want to disrupt, but how do we disrupt this space? The space wasn't inherently meant for us, and we're trying to make it for us. And so that to me is what I haven't seen in my work in the HBCU space. There's other tensions, but not that tension of disruption on this axis of race and inclusivity.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, that's powerful when you put it like that. Let me jump to Professor Washington. Jump in here and get a piece of this action.
Yeah, Dr. Keaton, thank you. Tremendous insight. I had a question. I'm on the DEI Council in the corporate world. So likewise, there's a struggle with the definition, the sheer definition of equity and inequality. And you mentioned that at the start. I was wondering, how is that really, transcribed, especially at historically white institutions? Because what I find in the corporate world is that there's a different definition for equity DEI with white people who are trying to institute DEI programs. And that now you mentioned yourself, Black people that are trying to do it. How does that work within HWIs or historic Black? I mean, how do you reconcile those differences? Because that's the start of understanding the difference in those definitions.
Yeah, I would say the difference is, I think in the HBCU space, there's ability to pinpoint to structures and policies and the historicity of not having resource and how laws cut HBCUs out. I know there's been lawsuits about that, about, hey, this wasn't actually equal funding you gave us, but you gave to this historically white college. And I think on the historically white college front, the ability to see how practices and structures and policies are embedded to perpetuate inequity, like that's too much. Wow. So that's why for me, sometimes I say sometimes I feel like they're trying to do this intersectional work, which is great. Like we should all want to think intersectionally, but we ain't there yet. To me, it reminds me of the NFL. We have an issue with Black men being promoted, and now the Rooney Rule includes women. Like, how do we make sense of that? If we haven't fixed it for one group, how are we going to think intersectionally? And to me, that is the harder conversation with DEI. People don't really want to have. Like, if we're still focused on this single identity issue, and we have for years, for decades, what makes you think we're ready to throw in other intersections? Because typically what happens, and I'll just take a look at the Rooney Rule, I'm curious with how that will promote white women. That's typically what we saw in corporate, right? Like that was the diversity.
And that's the point I was trying to make. In corporate, it's been historically applied to white women, but it leaves out or really dislocates other groups, and it's just not applied the way it should be. So I was wondering, thank you for bringing that up. I'm sorry.
I'll share you an excerpt from one of my Black women ADIOs was, can we keep the quote? So the quote is, can we keep steering this boat in the sea of racism? And so they're talking about the broader institutional field of collegiate athletics. When we think about resource allocation, who the labor of this, these aren't conversations that y'all already know all this, but when thinking about how do you create inclusivity if the entire organizational field is racialized? And I think that's what my ADIOs are trying to figure out. And so in my work, I'm very careful to not just say, it's them. Like for me, it's not them. Like what they're trying to do is a very daunting task in corporate and college athletics. And that's why you see in corporate, they don't hold the position that long because they're exhausted.
Right.
And so that's what I'm concerned with, particularly with Black women, is this notion of strength that they have. They have to be strong enough to experience marginalization and strong enough to eradicate it for others. And I haven't got into it for Black men yet, but preliminary data has showed, they know that Black men are the commodity of the broader collegiate athletic system, and they're trying to make sense of sharing the identity with the commodity and doing this work. And so there's a lot to unpack.
This is Dr. Will with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We have none other than Dr. Keaton at the University of Louisville, talking about Black female college athletes' sense of belonging at historically Black colleges and how that is interruptive and some other ideas in this space as well. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this break. Dr. Keaton, we love to keep you on and hold you maybe another 10 minutes or so we can follow up with some questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Stick with us. We'll be right back after this quick break.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU.
Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter. Are you ready? It's time. The inaugural Urban NerdCon is coming to Montgomery, Alabama, July 29th through the 31st. Blurs, nerds, and geeks from across the universe will converge on the capital city to see celebrity guests such as The Last Dragon, Tybok, Megan Tandy, and voice actor Dave Fennoy.
Hey, how you doing? I'm voice actor Dave Fennoy with a shout out to all my geeks, freaks, and urban nerds. Just want to let you know I'm going to be there and I want to meet you at the Urban NerdCon Gaming and Cosplay event. It's happening July 29th through the 31st in Montgomery, Alabama. Hope you want to meet me as much as I want to meet you.
So join us by visiting theurbannerdcon.net for ticket and vendor information. This will be the premier blurred event in the universe. Theurbannerdcon.net. Our heroes, our villains, our stories, everyone's con. See you there.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna love, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a.
This is Dr. Bill with Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, and Dr. Keaton, talking a little bit about Black female college athletes, as well as DEOs, in terms of diversity inclusion, athletic directors or those in leadership positions, whatever the title might be. But wanted to go a little bit back in terms of the study, and there are a couple of things that just blew me away. And I'll open it up first to this part, when make sure people are comfortable or aware at least. The purpose of this original study was to examine the college experience, academic, athletic, and social, of two groups: Black female college athletes at Division I historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, utilizing this belonging theory. The current study explored the Black female college athletes navigate their experiences and manage the multiple identities, race, gender, athletic status, etc., at a Division I HBCU. And you looked at it in terms of focus group, but you open up with this statement that really just stuck with me. I know it, but when you read it and hear it, it does something to you. Black females occupy unique positions within the United States society whereby they are often disadvantaged by both the dominant ideologies of patriarchy and women and racism as Blacks. So when you got into that and you have an understanding of that, how does, obviously being a African-American Black female, how does that help in terms of unpacking that and really getting to the root of some of this research and the things that you believe that the study was able to provide now those that read it?
Yeah, I think, being a Black woman, what other people probably can't see maybe when they're studying Black women or reading their experiences is just how linked racism and sexism are. I think you can't untangle it. And I think when you try to disentangle it, you try to see it as, they're a woman and then they're Black. Like, no, they're Black women, that they're simultaneously connected. And I think what was powerful in this work was, again, that this study didn't really bolster that. Not that it didn't exist. I think what we also have to remember with research, it's what they shared. And I think if you explicitly ask someone, hey, tell me about sexism, they'll tell me about sexism, right? But if you tell someone, hey, tell me about just your broader experiences, what is it like academically? And for them not to center and focus on that, to me, was huge. If I was to do that in the historically white context, that would have came up probably way earlier in the collection process, particularly in the focus group. And I think we see that. And I think, to me, that is the contribution of this work. If you scroll down on the paper, there's an excerpt about swim and how, again, that breaking that stereotype, like, yes, Black people do swim, and to be on a swim team at a HBCU, it's powerful. It's not just a simple, hey, this woman is talented enough to do this sport. It's challenging hegemonic ideals of Blackness. And I think that is what makes what they're doing much bigger than just participation. It's, in my opinion, an act of resistance, particularly when they're playing some of these sports that Black girls have not had access to. On the flip side, I think where I see my work going is really grappling with this class issue now, right? Like, okay, what type of Black families have access to volleyball? Volleyball is about $10,000 to $15,000 a year. And so if they're going Division I in volleyball, even at a HBCU, they play travel ball. You know what I mean? They had to compete at a high level. And so that doesn't change the cost of the sport and how talented they are in the sport, but it's something to think about. And imagine in this era that we're seeing with Black athlete consciousness is those, they had probably multiple options at this point, right? Like my sister, I shared with you, she was at a historically white college. She now decided to go to A&T. And even her, there's a class thing when we think about travel sports. And so I think that's one thing that hasn't really been parsed out, particularly with Black athlete research generally, is the class identity and how do we make sense of that with Black men in race and manhood and maleness, but also Black women with the intersection of sexism and racism.
One of the parts of research that I started looking at when you start talking about this intersectionality, in some parts of this is concerning to me, because in the US, you start hearing, once you dig in, whether it's the legal side of the research, that institutions have rights, right? And so if you go in this and you say that's true, when you talk about, playing for an HBCU in itself can be an act of resistance in itself. I wonder, does that also look at something that you can talk about from an institutional perspective? Obviously, you're hearing about these historically Black colleges leaving what many would refer to as historically Black conferences, right? And this is not necessarily new. You've seen it at the NIA level. You've seen it with Tennessee State, the name of institution that's been in a historically white conference, if you would, with every other institution being historically white colleges and universities. But you also see it now with Hampton and North Carolina A&T. But most recently, you had Howard talk about staying in a historically Black college, namely the MEAC. Could that be seen as an act of resistance, saying that, yeah, there may be financial, quote unquote, benefits if we look deeper enough, or there may be regional alignment that makes sense? Could the fact, in terms of this racial landscape, and you can't escape it, even though you might want to look at different ways to try to provide different attributes to your institution, is that something that you've looked at or considered, or just now that I've made it a thought based on your other research, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think like I told you, I would love to go down that rabbit hole with you and really think about that, because I do think, depending on which institution you ask, I think Colorado State would say they're always going to have financial problems, right? And so I think I would like to see that as an act of resistance, particularly as, in my other work, we're seeing white student athletes increase in some sports and how that changes the dynamic. But we also talked about offline, they lack a racial consciousness to really appreciate their HBCU. And so what happens to the student population and the history of the HBCU from an athletic lens, and we can also think of a social lens, but I'm focused on the athletic lens, when they do go to a new conference? How does maybe administration change? Are we going to see more individuals maybe want to go to work at these institutions because they're no longer affiliated with the Black conference? And so I think there's a lot to think about. But I would like to still see it as resistance, because we know the resources aren't the same, right? And so we understand that decision could be out of desperation or out of a real need. But there's so much value in staying in these historically Black conferences, and you see that with the student athletes.
Powerful. Now, this is Charles. Did you want to follow up on that?
And I guess I kind of wanted to shift focus just a little bit, because I'm often curious about the pathway to becoming an athletic director, and I'm fascinated by the complexity of the diversity and inclusion officer. Is this another prong in terms of a pathway towards higher leadership within the athletic department?
No, we don't know yet, because the position's so new. I'm curious to see where this position evolves. Is there career ascension? Is there not career ascension? But I think my problem broadly at the moment is they're all not senior level administrators. Some are, And so that's where I was talking to this issue with changing structures and trying to change norms. If you're not in the room where power lies to make some of those decisions to change things, it makes their job even more complex. And so at the moment, I'm not sure if that will transition to an AD, but it gets me thinking, you know, those that work in academic affairs, they typically don't become ADs, right? And so I wonder if this ADIO role, you know, and there's so many different languages for it, everyone has something else, but I just call it ADIO, you know, will it have that same consequence to where it's seen as you're the student athlete thing? Because that's what a lot of athletic departments are comfortable with, is these leaders doing programs. They want to do an affinity group for international students, for Black students, for Latino students, great. You want to look at contracts, you want to look at hiring practices, a little bit different, right? And those are those structural things that they have an immense amount of resistance. They experience, an immense amount of resistance. And so I don't know yet.
One thing that reminds me of is you see opportunities for African-American athletic directors, mainly male, but also some female, men and women, who come over to HBCUs and use that title space. But then the question also becomes, what have they actually learned in the other space in terms of contracts, and how that can be a detriment for when they come over to an HBCU and have to deal with it. So that's fascinating when you start unpacking what that looks like, when you start to see the opportunities exist, maybe not at a historically white college, but at a historically Black college. But then does that really help the HBCU based on their real experience in an athletic director role? So Mike, let me let you follow up with a question before we get into our last break.
Yeah, so I think I was reading a couple of pieces in the paper, and it talked about the divergent theme, and it talked about, are they understanding me? And kind of the switch gears, I kind of went back to my role in the corporate world as a DEI officer. Okay, talk to me about what does that mean in the context of a historically white institution? I think I know it, and then also at a historically Black college and university. Are they understanding me? Because there's meanings and examples in the corporate world, but that could have a different context in the athletic world, especially going back to Charles's previous question.
So I think if that theme was to manifest in the historically white space, I think it would be the lack of understanding, again, the complexities of being a Black girl, a Black woman in this context. I think here what we saw really wasn't this resistance from faculty or administrators. I think what was interesting is the conversation around coaches. And I think that can be bolstered. That's probably the divergent theme that you were talking about, is that what was fascinating, and we didn't really parse it out because it wasn't the focus of the research question, but we've seen it even with white athletes that attend HBCUs, is, coaches still feel that pressure that we often just think, oh, it's just at the historically white colleges and universities. Like, not true. That pressure is an organizational field of collegiate sport. And I think that manifests with the relationships that these athletes assume are going to happen, right? Like, I'm going to an HBCU, I'm going to assume that the dynamic is going to be X, Y, and Z. And I think when it wasn't, because they weren't thinking, oh, it's the same pressure that these coaches are under. It doesn't matter the level, it doesn't matter the affiliation of the university. And so I would like to see more work on coaching in this space. I know y'all can probably talk about him later, but I know Dion has kind of become the face of HBCU coaching, but what does that look like for Black women head coaches, particularly in women's basketball? That broader study I was talking about, that I am collaborating with Professor Nefertiti Walker at University of Massachusetts Amherst, there was this thought where when Black female head coaches go to HBCUs, they're stuck. And so to me, like, what does that do for how maybe they interact with their players? In the one case example I'm thinking of, she was so focused on developing them holistically. That is something to me, you just don't hear about as often in the HWI space, is that she really wanted to empower these young girls. And so again, I think that gets back to my point, is it's a both and. You're not just gonna, I wouldn't just say, this is the holy grail, like they're gonna be safe, like nothing's gonna happen, they're gonna just love their experience. Like, yes, some of them will, but there's also these other complexities that I think HBCU Black females can see how their experiences are still shared with those that go to HWIs.
Thank you. I like how you break that down, that divergent theme. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it takes me to going back to Jackson State with Tamika Reed and the comments she made after the Baylor game, where you talking about a different level of complexity, a different level of thought for different reasons, not just as an individual, but now you talk about a gender responsibility, mothering, and those kind of things.
Yeah, you hit that on the nail. That other mothering. And so think about the different labor that is, right? My head coach just had to win. That was his job as a white male, right? He didn't have these other responsibilities to think about, how am I developing as a young Black woman, which I think Black women, particularly in the HBCU basketball space, carry that a little bit differently. And that interview was perfect.
Well, close it right here. And like I said, we'll get a chance, and we're going to do some of that research since you doubled down and you told the public world that you want to see me do that along with you.
There we go.
Challenge.
But when you talk about, obviously, Black female college athletes, a sense of belonging at historically Black college universities, this was in the Journal of Negro Education. We'll find a way to get some of the information out to our listeners, because they love to dive into this, and it's important that, and you are of this ilk much as myself, that our research does not just stay in the academy, that we see it in a different level.
Yeah, 100%.
But you talk about the athletic diversity and inclusion officer, but this sentence here, and you brought this up a little bit, but it is the only position in which one's marginalization is drawn upon to meet the demands of a job's responsibility. That just is heavy to me when you talk about that. But we talk about Black girl magic. It seems like in a lot of ways when you're talking about, when we really look at it, we need to look at it Black girl resistance.
Yes. And I think, when I wrote that, I struggled with that paper and that research, because I didn't want to make it seem like that was okay. And I didn't want to make it seem like the participants were intentionally drawing upon these outsider within experiences. But because, again, like my point is, because they know marginalization in society at large and within collegiate athletics, they have this idea of, well, let me center my own experiences of oppression to think about what inclusivity is. And I think in that paper, you'll see their ability to put intersectionality into praxis, and not just use intersectionality as a theoretical lens, but you can see them talk about the intersections of these race-gendered experiences and how it manifests in them thinking about other individuals. And so I conclude that paper talking about Black women are literally creating inclusive organizations for themselves.
Wow. Well, we'll let you go on that. We'll certainly bring you back as we continue this research. I hope folks appreciate it. We're in the middle of this Title IX and many different things going on with the world, obviously with the Supreme Court ruling. But I thought it was important to allow a woman, a beautiful Black woman, to get on here and share a perspective of research that speaks to a unique perspective. And again, hashtag Black girl resistance.
There we go.
You put a pin on that in such a way that it allows me to look at it differently, and I'll forever be thankful. Continue to move forward with that research, and we'll make sure that we get it out to the people to understand that your voice needs to be heard. So again, thank you for your.
Thank you. It was so nice connecting with y'all, and I'll touch base with y'all later.
All right. This is Dr. Cavil inside HBCU Sports Lab. We'll be right back after this break. That is Dr. Keaton of the University of Louisville. Check her out. She's up and coming. You see how she's going to bring it. She's not going to hide from anybody.
Oh, that spin class was brutal. Well, you can try using the Buick's massaging seat.
Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Can I use Apple CarPlay to put some music on?
Sure, it's wireless.
Pick something we all like. Okay, hold on. What's your Buick's Wi-Fi password?
Buick Envision 2021.
Oh, you should pick something stronger. That's really predictable.
That's a really tight spot.
Don't worry, I used to hate parallel parking.
Me too.
Hey.
Really outdid yourself.
Yes, we did.
The all-new Buick Envision, an SUV built around you, all of you.
Are you hungry for authentic Caribbean food? Like jerk chicken, oxtail, red snapper, shrimp, tofu, and rasta pasta? Well, find your way over to Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta.
Them belly full, but we hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, open daily from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, we're open till 4 a.m. Come to Mango's and put some spice in your life.
So we've got a good thing going.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta. For more info or directions, call 404-698-3992 or log on to mangoscaribbeanrestaurant.com. For instant coupons, text MANGOS to 313131.
Tell your mama hungry, papa hungry, brother hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, authentic Caribbean cuisines.
Open up the door, tell them mama hungry.
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge, featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. That's www.slowburnwaco.com.
Since 2000. Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna loud, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Hope you enjoyed the interview with Ajana Keaton, Dr. Ajana Keaton, in terms of the work that she was speaking about. Wanted to get a little bit in this news. It seemed like the collective internet again kind of broke in terms of Black Twitter, particularly if you want to go to the next level. HBCU Black Twitter broke for sure when Diddy said that he was going to give $1 million to Howard University and then $1 million to Deion Sanders and Jackson State football, ending it with the quote, because he believes we should play with us. I say, sound like football. For us, by us. Okay. I guess that's part of that resistance that people wanted, not quite ready for, but we can understand, you know, there's financial need and people do things for the money oftentimes. We'll see what that's about. But I thought that was good. HBCU Game Day took a deeper dive and had a chance to interview Larry Scott, the head football coach of Howard University, just talking about that opportunity. So check that out if you would. Some good comments there in terms of that. He just simply said, with the eyes of entertainment world watching him, Sean Diddy Combs pledged to give that $1 million to Howard, along with $1 million to Deion Sanders and Jackson State football. Let me go to you, Charles. Just in general, what were your thoughts when that resonated? I don't know if you were watching the BET Awards, and kudos to Diddy for getting the Lifetime Achievement Award in regards to that. It's a significant recognition when you recognize it that, but the way he closed it, I thought was fascinating. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I was blown away. I wasn't watching it, but my phone like blew up within seconds when it happened, and it made me, turn over to see what was going on. And then once I read it, my mouth dropped, because when you take a look at a donation of that ilk going towards Jackson State football, that's huge. I mean, what you can do with that sort of money specifically for a leg within the program of athletics, I can't imagine what is going to spring forward for Jackson State football with a donation of that amount. But I kudos to P. Diddy in terms of what he's trying to do, and it's all part of that leveling the playing field mantra that Coach Prime has talked about for quite some time.
May I ask you from this perspective, Mike? I know some people were concerned that it seems like Howard always get mentioned or money when this, even though we know that's not the case. Oftentimes you do that. But I thought it was weird in this case when you talk about Puff Daddy, I would say P. Diddy. He actually went to Howard, so who else is he supposed to celebrate than Howard? And then obviously the host, Pension, she's a Howard University alumni as well. So I thought it was fascinating when you're talking about one side of it, but in this case, it was different when these folks were literally making the argument. the real HU. So he's like, what are we missing here when folks get, aggravated or disappointed? Where is that coming from?
I don't know. That's coming from a bad place, personally.
Oh man,
seriously, that's coming. I don't know where that's coming from. That's a bad place. This man is committed. $1 million. He committed. To Howard. He went to Howard, attended, performed at Howard. Heck, I was there one homecoming when he went there. That was at one of my road trips. So what the heck else is he supposed to, commit to? What do you expect him to commit to? Go ahead, Charles. I'm sorry.
My grandma used to say, "Don't count somebody else's pockets because you block your blessing." And I can't figure out why people lose their mind because somebody made a donation to what they wanted to donate to. So
exactly.
I'll never get perspective.
And then he throws some money in the Jackson State pot. Why not? So it's his money. So
yeah. When my guy at Morehouse, when he decided to take on the debt of everybody that was graduating from Morehouse, that's what he wanted to do. Who are you to count his pockets? So I can never figure out that weird perspective from people.
Did you get more? I mean, give credit to HBCU Sports and a couple of, you didn't get mad at Chris Paul when he donated money to several universities. He's taking classes at Winston-Salem State. You gonna get mad because he's not at Elizabeth State? I mean, you didn't get mad because George Lynch and he's done. You didn't get mad at rap. What was the rapper? Travis Scott. He's donating money. You're gonna get mad at every celebrity. Where does it stop? They're donating to HBCUs. Where does it stop? It is their money. It is benefiting an HBCU. Let's leave it there. Shh.
Let me stick with you, Mike. What are some other news you wanted to share?
I'm still gonna let it go. I'm really still gonna let it go. So I was going, ask CB, I know he's got his travel plan books, but this Bethune-Cookman to host Jackson State at an NFL stadium, I want to turn that over to CB and see what his thoughts. Any change, any expected differences? I'll let you have it. So,
I know he got to change the airfare.
Yeah, I know, right? Exactly. Well, it's Bethune-Cookman's home game, so we will allow for them to do what they want to do with that home game.
We will allow. That's why I'm crazy about Jackson State.
He said it. You see how he slipped that in? We'll allow.
Hey, man, off to Jacksonville we go.
Sticking with you, Charles, what's some other news out there that is exciting for you right now?
Well, that was going to be one of those things. Bethune-Cookman, they will be hosting Jackson State at the Jacksonville Jaguar Stadium. That game will now be in Jacksonville, Florida. But some other news out there, and this is huge news in the world of women's basketball. Dariana Lewis, she has entered the transfer portal from Alabama A&M. Of course, she was a stalwart on those basketball teams the past 2 years. Alabama A&M being right there in the upper echelon over there with women's basketball, but a huge loss for that Alabama A&M program with all swag for Dariana Lewis in the transfer portal.
Before we go into this last break, I want to talk about Jarvis Christian as men's and women's wrestling for HBCU Sports. I'm not sure if we've seen an HBCU wrestling program in the South, particularly the Southwest, so this is fascinating to see this in Texas at Jarvis Christian University. Notice I said Jarvis Christian University, as they also changed from Jarvis Christian College to Jarvis Christian University. That was brought to attention by Athletic Director Bob Ladner, announced the addition of men's and women's wrestling program as the expansion of JCU's athletic department. They'll be starting that program in the upcoming year. It's going to be fascinating to see what that looks like in terms of them participating in the Sooner Athletic Conference, even though they are a member in all other sports of the Red River Athletic Conference. With that, let's take our last break. We'll be right back on the other side, talk a little bit about more news, and get these two gentlemen thoughts on the world of HBCU sports. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this last break.
Since 2002, Empowerment Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization, has empowered more than 1,500 youth and adults in Duval and surrounding counties through its programs Journey into Womanhood, Girls Mentoring, Life Skills for Teens, and Parenting Education Coaching. To get involved with programs, volunteer, or donate, visit www.empowermentresourcesinc.org. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/empowerment.resources and instagram.com/empowermentJAX.
For 200 years, Montgomery, Alabama has been making history by people who had the courage to stand up for change. Today, this riverfront city has been reborn, embracing the past and looking forward to the future. From the National Memorial for Peace and Justice to the stage of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, this is where history was and is made. We are proud to call Montgomery home, and together, we can be the change.
Are you ready? It's time. The inaugural Urban NerdCon is coming to Montgomery, Alabama, July 29th through the 31st.
World, what's happening? Rob Morgan here. Just letting you know, July 29th through the 31st, I'll be at Montgomery, Alabama, Urban NerdCon. Come on out, get something signed, take a photo, say hello, let's share some stories and create some memories, you know? Peace.
So join us by visiting theurbannerdcon.net for ticket and vendor information. This will be the premier blurred event in the universe. TheUrbanNerdCon.net. Our heroes, our villains, our stories, everyone's con. See you there.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a law, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Sticking with you, Charles, coming out of that break. I know there's some other women's basketball news that you want to share as well. What's on your mind? Somebody in the portal?
Yeah, let's keep an eye on Don Thornton's UAPB Lady Golden Lions. They added a newest member of the basketball team, Mallory Davenport. She's a former five-star prospect in class of 2024. She started her career at Rutgers before transferring to Georgia. So Mallory Davenport, 6'4" center from Troy, Alabama, now joins the UAPB Lady Golden Lions roster. Pair her with Zay Green, redshirt junior, coming back. And I tell you what, UAPB Lady Golden Lions, they could be trouble over there on the Western Division.
Yeah, this is a Golden Lions team that people may have forgotten. In non-conference schedule, they got some of the best non-conference wins of the conference in terms of non-conference. Also, remember that they were one of the teams that played Jackson State women's basketball that won everything. They played them really well. That was both in terms of the regular season, that last game, and in the tournament, especially for 3/4 of that game. It seemed like they just slightly ran out of the gas in the championship pedigree, and Jackson State was able to kick in. But to your point, this is a team quietly that people need to keep their eyes on in terms of what Coach Don is doing over there. This should be a formidable team.
Yeah,
in terms of keep your eyes on. With that, let me go to you, Mike. What else was on your mind in terms of HBCU news in the atmosphere?
Yeah, courtesy of a couple of sources, again, give those folks credit. HBCU Game Day, I think it was HB Sports. I think I saw a blip on Twitter. Grambling State hooper Prince Moss, drafted by the Harlem Globetrotters. So he was selected in the 2022 Harlem Globetrotters draft. Wow. So he's a native, played for 4 seasons for the Grambling State Tigers between 2018 and 2022. Throughout his career, he averaged 22 and 5, 8 minutes, 8 points, 3 rebounds, and a game at the position. He shot pretty much 43% from the field, 35% from deep over the course. But there's a quote saying that this guy can completely fly. So not only did he compete for the Tigers on the court, but he also did his thing on the track and field. He competed in the high jump during the 2022 NCAA regional preliminaries this past May, and he finished 19th in the competition. Quite the athlete. So congratulations to Prince Moss.
I watched him catch a couple off the rim. He can fly.
Oh,
yeah, look out.
He's entertaining.
Yeah.
Look out, Curly Mo. Look out, Curly.
Yeah, he is extremely talented. I'm glad to hear that for the young man to get a chance to continue. Because like I said, he's extremely entertainment. As you can see, he's talented. And until you hear it again, I always forget that he did that in track and field. And like you said, not just conference-wise, regional. So extremely talented. Congratulations to Prince Moss. Talking about counting other people's money or other folks sharing the money, Baltimore Ravens award inaugural Ozzie Newsome Scholarship to 20 city school graduates attending Maryland HBCUs from BaltimoreFishbowl.com. This came for a total of 20 Baltimore City high school graduates that are each incoming freshmen to one of the Maryland's historically Black college universities. That's Bowie State, Coppin State, Morgan State, and the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Baltimore Ravens owner Stephen Swascati and his wife Renee created the scholarship program in honor of longtime Ravens executive Ozzie Newsome. Stephen and Renee Lascotti's foundation made $4 million gift in his name to all the 4 Maryland HBCUs, providing $1 million scholarship funds to each of the institutions. The foundation donated $400,000 to the college-bound foundation to fund the Newsome Scholars' participation in that program. Big time move. Shout out to the Baltimore Ravens, Steve Lascotti and his wife for making that happen, especially in the name of Ozzie Newsome, executive that had a lot of success for the Baltimore Ravens there. I'm gonna have to shout out to Ben Cavil. See, played his professional football time there, and I got to see the Ravens, so I got a different perspective when I got to see that in there. I'd be remiss, and we'll talk about this maybe a little more on Thursday in detail, but wanted to get out there. I got a chance to be on there and provide a question from a virtual perspective, and that was the 2022 Cricket MEAC SWAC Challenge Kickoff Media Presser. Howard, for those that all except with Howard, they really gonna lose their mind. But this was scheduled before. Maybe different. They hadn't played in it, MEAC SWAC Challenge before, but Howard University Bison will take on Alabama State. That is Coach Larry Scott and Eddie Robinson of Alabama State. Provided some great open dialogue and questions. I like the fact that they included this, and they brought them up there. And one of the things I've been pushing for a while is they had the band directors provide some remarks. That was Kelvin Washington for Howard University, Showtime Band, Dr. James Oliver of Alabama State's band there. So I thought that was fascinating that they mixed it up. Finally, people are listening. I tried to tell them some marketing keys of what to get done. Charles, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's huge. That's an element that makes the HBCU football game tremendous. One of the most exciting events on Saturday. So you definitely want to be able to utilize the band directors and let them talk about their programs as well.
Yeah, when you talk about opening up, John Grant, Executive Director of the Cricket MEAC SWAC Challenge, and that's the 17 MEAC SWAC Challenge as well as the Cricket Celebration Bowl. You had the VP and Chief Marketing, Anthony, was there, along with Tanitra Batiste, who moderated the event. Any final thoughts on that from you, Mike, in terms of the MEAC SWAC Challenge? Steve Gaither, shout out to Steve Gaither, asking his questions in terms of the lopsided wins by MEAC SWAC Challenge. I did jump in there and text him and say it has been 2-2 in the last 4 matchups.
Yeah, exactly.
But you could tell, though, in a lot of ways that Eddie Robinson Jr., in terms of coming from the SWAC, was really immersed in that question. He basically, I take it personally. He said, "This is a SWAC. We're not supposed to lose like that." He said, "Hey, the record speaks for itself."
You know what would be cool? What would be cool is you get to rename it if you win that challenge, or if you win the Celebration Bowl. Now it becomes the SWAC MEAC Challenge. If the MEAC wins, they come the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Just something to throw out there.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. That's pretty.
Yeah, put your little thing on it.
Mike?
That's a great marketing idea. Put your little spin on it. I like it.
Yeah. So we can do it here. If they don't pick it up,
exactly.
Yeah, I'm interested in the Howard alumni. How are they gonna travel? How are they gonna show up? What's the presence? Alabama State's gonna be there. I want to see where the Bison contingent.
Come on, Bison contingent. Come on.
I want to see where the Bison contingent is. So
they said they will be there, but the problem is they're gonna be in the suite.
Is that what?
Man, they enjoy their football differently than y'all. Y'all
Yeah,
worry about
I
they ain't got no money. They'll be there. They just be in the suite. They be sitting.
I talked to my friends. I talked to my friends in the corporate. I talked to my friends in the corporate. I was like, "Y'all gonna be there? Oh, we're gonna be there. Whatever. You know how bougie Howard is. Whatever. You're right. They're gonna be up in the suite. They're gonna be in some air conditioned car outside listening to the game." With an umbrella.
That's cold blooded. That's cold blooded. I'm gonna tell you about the Howard folks. They gonna come get you. They gonna come get you, Mike. That was Mike. That wasn't me. That was Mike.
Let them come. Let them come. I want to see the Howard contingent.
You mean there's a rank and file Howard fan? Really? Oh.
I want to see the Howard fan.
Charles getting in the mix as well.
I want to see the Howard fan come out.
Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Let me go for these guys get themselves in even more trouble. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, with our guest, Dr. Ajane Keaton, providing you some insights on her research. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Ville's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday. We'll be back on Thursday at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time. Apologize for the late start, but we got it to you. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest in the news. And with that, I mean Thursday. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DrKenyattaCavil. That's DrKenyattaCavil. Inside the HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, as you know, Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Dream big, continue to move forward. Make sure you download my JVN, my BCSN, the app, so we can continue to do what we do. Make sure you're listening to Sports Rap with Brian and AD, Strike Zone, the ONG Strike Zone, as they bring it to you, as well as Carlos Brown, as he brings it to you every Saturday, providing you the latest and greatest. We will talk with you soon, Charles.
Of course.
Mike.
Lecture.
Dismiss.